Humans of the Cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today I'm doing a very fun video for anybody who's actually trying to get into Yu-Gi-Oh! On a more competitive level. The whole basis of this video is I'm going to break down little tiers for you, depending on how much you're willing to spend to try and get into competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! And basically the core staple cards that I would pretty much recommend looking at if you're just trying to get into the game a little more competitively, depending on what you want to spend. So this is the perfect time to get into this. We just got a new set called the 25th Anniversary Rarity Collection. They reprinted a ton of just absolute awesome staple cards that have not been reprinted in a while. Really brings down the price, really makes the competitive game way more affordable, and this is the perfect time to do it, so because everything's just a little bit better. So I've got three tiers. I've got a $30 price range, a $60 price range, and a $100 price range, and then some stuff that if you really don't have anything holding you back financially, just go ahead and send it on these cards because you're gonna want them at some point. So we'll talk about that as we go, but let's just get into this thing. Let's start off with our first cart here. I'm using TCG Player just as a prerequisite here. Everything I have here is in a cart by a pretty big seller that has done a ton of different sales, so they're a little bit more reputable, and you can trust them better. Everything is near mint first ed, not messing around with anything under near mint, and I usually just go first ed because if you ever want value later on, you're going to want first ed, not unlim. So and rarity doesn't matter here, right? We're talking about a new player who just wants to be able to start playing. Later on, if you want to upgrade these cards because you play them all the time and you just want to have a nicer rarity, go ahead and do that. But I think if you're just getting started, we don't need to worry about rarity at all. So there's a bunch of different categories here as far as what I think you would want to look for competitive cards and the function of the cards themselves. The first one, a lot of these are defensive cards, generic cards. So hand traps, going first, going second, they're just going to come up. They can be played. A lot of the generic ones can be played in almost any format. Really nice generic cards to have. Consistency boosting cards. There's not a ton of those that generically work across every deck, but I do have a couple here that I'd recommend scooping. Flex spells. These are spells that can kind of go first or second. They kind of play a similar role to hand traps, but they're spells that maybe are a little less ceiling, a little lower ceiling, but they can kind of play first or second. You have going second cards. These are more board breaker, heavy duty, punch your opponent in the mouth type cards, but they're not as great going first. And then you have going first cards that kind of same thing, but going first instead of going second. And then I have some small extra deck stuff that extra deck is so specific to the deck most of the time, but you'll see at the end, we'll talk about a couple extra deck cards that probably will just come up for you if you play the game long enough. Okay, let's get started off with our first cart here. Sorry they're not in order. The order, they kind of put it in alphabetical order here, so it kind of gets a little annoying to go through, but let's just get through it. So first off, first cart, $30. Anti-Spell Fragrance, 3 copies of that, 18 cents. This is a really good blowout floodgate spell going first against decks that play a lot of spell cards. Very powerful. Mostly a side deck card. Ash Blossom. This is by far the most expensive card we have in the first wave, but it's Ash. You have to have it. I'm sorry. I know this card's almost $10 for a playset out of our $30 budget. You have to have this. It is going to be in your deck almost every single format. At 3, just have it. Book of Eclipse. Funny enough, Book of Moon is way more expensive than Book of Eclipse, even though Book of Eclipse has been better as of late in the last couple formats. But this guy's got a couple different commons, 22 cents, super doable. Really like this card. It's just one of those cards that's good going first, good going second. Definitely have those on you. Called by the Grave. Sorry there's no art here. This card is at 1 on the ban list. That's why I only have 1 copy here. But it does protect you from hand traps, and especially as a new player, it's just a card that you can just always put in as a placeholder. It's going to protect you from hand traps. It can even help you play going second sometimes into certain graveyard-based decks. It's just a really good generic card that I like having. Cosmic, I love this card, even now, not even just straight up, oh, this is a good starter card. Literally, format to format, I find myself wanting to play this card because it's good for back row decks. The fact that it's a quick play means it can be good, even setting, going first versus certain decks. I really love the flexibility of this card, and not just being back row hate, but a little bit diverse back row hate. Dark the Dark Charmer, I think this is one of the only extra deck monsters here we have on this list. Listen, dark decks are just so prevalent in this game. Dark is one of the few Link monsters that generically I think every player should just have at the ready. It's not always going to be amazing. It's not always going to be perfect depending on the deck you're playing against or the format we're currently in, but I do think you should have one in the bank ready to go. Valor. This is just budget imperm, not gonna lie. If you're on these lower budget tiers, I would play Valor, but also there are also times where you play Valor and imperm in some deck lists, so I'd still want both anyway. Good generic hand trap, just kind of the less good imperm overall. Evenly matched, a little more expensive here as well, crossing that $1 range, but such a good going second card, and the fact that this now with its new reprint from the 25th anniversary set really makes this card super affordable for everybody, and you should just have it at the ready. It's a really powerful card. It helps you break boards. Get ready on that. I'm going to split this here. We have two kaijus here. Gameciel's the premier kaiju, the best one overall, but he's not nearly as affordable as these, so I would pick these up. I just think they're super versatile side deck cards. Like, they're always doing something. They're not always breaking a board by themselves, but they're always hitting something and giving you a chance to play. So I like them. I think they're a nice, safe option for side decking. Unicorn, just a super generic card. If you're just playing a deck that puts bodies on the field, Unicorn can and probably will come up to just help you with extra removal. I love that. Super cheap, just one copy there. And then Nibiru, last card on here, one of the more expensive cards as well. Yeah, I mean, it's Nib. It's your high impact. Oh, actually, I have a couple more. Hold on. But Nibiru, higher impact hand trap here. Just stopping combo decks. You got to have something to handle combo decks. Sometimes some combo decks like really handle board breakers, so you need hand traps to stop them before they get there. It's just a good card. You should definitely have it for sure. And our final stuff here, we have D-Barrier. This is another going first card. Just going to blanket handle going first matchups versus, you know, decks that are pretty set on one type of extra deck mechanic. Pot of Desires, good consistency card here. I believe it's still at 2 on the ban list, but a lot of people don't like playing 3 anyway, so it just depends. Super cheap anyway, but yeah, Desire is really good. It's a draw 2 card, but it doesn't work in every deck because of the way it banishes 10 of your main deck, but just keep that in mind. Small World, really small consistency card here as well, funny enough. It's just one of the things where, like, if you play a deck, like it's maybe a rogue deck or something like that, and it struggles with consistency, you can't afford Prosperity, this card can be the difference. There. Maybe you don't always play 3 copies, but it can be the difference for a deck that really wants to see 1 or 2 main monsters in the deck. This card can help you get there by playing like stuff like hand traps as bridges to get there, which is really nice. And the last card here is DD Crow. You got to have some kind of graveyard hate. There's just too many good decks out there that play with the graveyard. You have to have something to kind of bother them, and that's where DD Crow comes in really nice. So yeah, that's my first wave there. Those are the first $30 I would spend if I'm a competitive player trying to get into the game more competitively. I would say start more on the rogue tier. Maybe you're not able to afford all the high-end staples and stuff, but this is a good base, and you'll be able to cover a lot of formats, a lot of the competitive scene with just these $30 worth of cards. That takes us to our next set here of cards. Another $30 card adding on to that first 30 to get us to 60. That's our second bracket here if you can afford to spend it. We're not going to have a ton of cards here, but they're going to be a little more expensive, and that's why they didn't make it into that first tier. First is Triple Tactics Talent. Really amazing card. Its effects really cover everything you could ever want. Hand rip your opponent, draw 2, or snatch steal an opponent's monster. Really phenomenal card, really versatile card. Every player is going to want these eventually, so I would definitely scoop it here in the second tier. Dark Ruler No More. This could have fit in the first tier, but there was just other stuff I kind of prioritized over it. Just another good going second card. Depending on the type of board that certain decks set up, this card just being able to blanket turn off every face-up monster your opponent controls is really valuable. Definitely worth a look there. Forbidden Droplet. I love this card. This is one of my favorite cards to mess around with if it's not terrible in a format, because it's one of those great flex spells. Good going first, good going second. It's a discard outlet for certain decks. Like, obviously not every deck wants to play it because not every deck has all that available discard fodder, but if you do play a more graveyard based deck, this card is a really good consideration there. And it really has good interactions versus a good amount of stuff in the game. Harpy's Feather Duster. I want high-end back row hate. Cosmic Cyclone's not enough one-for-oneing like big matchups like a Labyrinth that are going to set multiple cards. So Harpy's Feather Duster, being able to try and blanket wipe an entire back row, really does come in handy. Hita, the Fire Charmer. This is the next Charmer that really matters. You could pick up all the Charmers, to be honest, if you want. But these two are the most important to me because Ash Blossom's in every format, so this card can always be decent. But specifically for the next like year or so, I expect there to be a good amount of Fire decks running around too, because Konami's just been making so many that are competitively relevant. So I actually think this one's the next best one other than Dark. Plus it's super cheap, so it's like easy to fit in here. And the last card we have here is Book of Moon. We already have Book Eclipse, but there are times where Book of Moon is actually just better. It's lower ceiling, but it's more consistently doing what you want it to do. It's a little bit more expensive than Book of Eclipse, so just keep that in mind. But I still really, really would want anybody I'm like giving advice to have both at some point. So still keep an eye on it and keep a plan to pick up Book of Moon eventually. There. So there's our second wave. That gets us to around $60 here. Keep in mind, things are going to fluctuate as time goes on. Some of these cards are going to go up. Some of these cards are going to go down. Hopefully they stay around this price, or at least if anything go down. Over time, some of these cards get a little cheaper, get more reprints, yada, yada, yada. That takes us to our final card here, around $40 here to bring us to that $100 price range. You know, and I think this is the one I would recommend to most people because you're going to buy archetypes. Like there are meta archetypes these days where just the core of the actual theme, the archetype, is going to be like $200. But if you have these cards, you only have to spend this $100 one time. And this can be a third to half of every deck list you're going to play for the next couple of years, other than like some small new cards that you're going to want to pick up here and there. So I definitely recommend the $100 drop. And let's get into that. Again, it's going to be a few more expensive things because we couldn't find room for it before. Infinite Impermanence. This is the upgrade from Valor. Once you can finally spend $100, I would make the move on Imperm. You're always going to find yourself playing this over Valor. You still might play Valor as like additional copies for like to more consistently see hand traps like this, but Imperm's the better one for sure. It also doesn't turn on tactics or thrust or anything like that. So yeah. Lightning Storm, really, really good board breaker. We already brought it up with like Harpy's Feather Duster in the last wave. This is another card that really helps you push in on back row based decks as well, but also has the versatility to hit boards at the same time. Being able to wipe all attack position monsters can still be really valuable as well. Just a really powerful blanket wipe card. And the last card here is Pot of Prosperity. This is the card that I wanted to fit anywhere in this list. I really believe that, like, I made a video a couple months ago saying this is the best card in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's going to be underlying. People aren't going to be like, oh, that card's crazy all the time, because you more so are like, this card's like the card it finds you are crazy. But this, I think, is the most important card in Yu-Gi-Oh! In my opinion, and I understand just a playset of this is going to be close to $25. So that is no like simple thing, especially if you're getting started and you want to get all these other cards too. But listen, this card's going to come up in probably 70% of decks you're going to want to play. There are decks that need their extra too much, but as long as you're bouncing around on decks at least a little bit, this card is going to be huge. It's the single best generic consistency card that exists in this entire game. I think you need to have it if you really want to take that step to like legit competitive play in Yu-Gi-Oh! So definitely scoop that up. But yeah, that's it. Just 3 cards here making up a whole $40 wave, just because these kind of add up here. $12 for the Imperms, $6 for the Lightning Storms, and then like over 20 for the Prosperities. But this may be the single most important card here, other than like stuff like Ash Blossom, right? But yeah, that's our third wave. That gets us to $100. So that's everything I would recommend if you're willing to spend $100. If you have no budget, okay? And this is an important category, because I do believe all of these cards will come up for you eventually if you play the game long enough. The first one is Judgment. Sorry, I don't have a cart for these. The first one is Judgment. And this one's not too crazy price-wise. It just didn't make the cut for me. It's a more generic option when you're going first post-side, because it just blanket negates any spell or trap or the inherent summon of a monster. It's just a really good, like, super safe side deck option for going first, whereas like Anti-Spell and D-Barrier are a little more targeted. So I like that. Droll and Lockbird, card you definitely should look at having at some point. It's just like $5 a copy, so that was pretty hefty for just another hand trap added to the numerous ones we already listed in this video already. Typhon, this is a new card, so this card's already like $18. You only want 1 copy of it though, so that's the one good thing there. He helps you break boards. He helps you in really certain matchups, and he's just a generic card that's not going to come up super consistently. But when he does, he's just like going to win you a game every once in a while that you otherwise would be losing. So I definitely still recommend you having him. If you have space in your extra deck, you probably just put one in. Zeus. Any deck that can make XYZ monsters, Zeus is something you have to keep in mind. So it's too generic. It's going to come up. It's going to come up for you almost like any deck that makes Exceeds. You see this card in there. It just is what it is. It's another $17 card. Keep that in mind. But only one copy should be fine. Access code. Again, any deck that just puts monsters on the field. Sometimes this card is the difference between being able to OTK or not. Plus, there's only so many monster types in the game. If you ever end up on a Cybers deck, that probably means access code is a pretty good tool to have there. He's just generically good enough. He is somewhere around like $30, 25, $30 these days. Hopefully he gets more reprints to bring him down because he's actually been out for a while. But yep, still another one there. And the last one, and maybe the most important one for the extra deck overall, is SP Little Knight. The problem is this card just came out and it's the chase card of like the best set of the year. So this card by itself is floating around $100. I totally understand if you're not willing to drop that just yet. Hopefully in the next year or two, we will get a reprint on this that brings it down significantly. Obviously, we'll have to wait until we see on that. But I'm just saying, if you do not have a budget, this card is kind of like Typhon in that just any deck you play, you're probably just going to play it. This is the Ash Blossom of the extra deck. If you have room for it, you play it. If you don't, as long as your deck doesn't lock you out of Link Summoning or lock you out of summoning it, you just play a copy of it because it just comes up too generically. It is an incredible card, and it's just going to be there. It's just the most easy to access form of removal and interruption the game now has built into the extra deck. So I recommend having it if you're willing to spend it. But that's obviously up to you. You have to set your own budget and work with what you got. So yeah. That's pretty much it for the whole video. Hopefully this is a good baseline for anybody looking to get started on the competitive scene of Yu-Gi-Oh! Depending on what your budget is, you start maybe with the first bracket, play a little bit there so you don't have to commit too much of an investment. If you really have a good time and you want to take that next step, work to the 60, work to the 100, and then start looking at some of these big boy extra deck cards that could come up generically for you as well. But there you go. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section down below. Maybe some other generic cards that you think could have fit in on these lists. Definitely let me know down there if you have any recommendations for some newer players there. But I'm ready for today. Thank you so much for watching as always, guys. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this down the line. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.